Welcome back to this series of Black Hat Fast Chats. I am joined now by Perry Carpenter, who's Chief Evangelist and Strategy Officer for training and education company KnowBe4. Perry, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The big headline for the year, of course, is COVID and work from home. Curious what lessons you may have learned during the pandemic with regard to awareness and social engineering.
Yeah, so I think probably a couple things. Number one is that cyber criminals are always going to jump on this thing that's front of mind for everybody, and anything that has lots of emotion attached to it. So, of course, we saw COVID-based phishing email just jump like crazy, and people falling for that. The other one is that when we try to train people, we have to make sure that it's relevant and that we do it with empathy. Otherwise, we're creating a disconnect. And so cyber criminals are taking advantage of it. We can take advantage of it too, but we have to do it with the right tone.
Do you find this as a challenge when some people are dismissing the pandemic as a hoax? Does that resistance come up among your trainees?
We didn't see it come up amongst the trainees because no matter what, even if they believe it's a hoax, they're home when they weren't before. Their life has changed when it hasn't changed the same way as before. So they're facing the same dilemma that everybody's facing, even if they don't believe in the cause of that.
All right. Switching gears slightly, KnowBe4 has recently interviewed a number of experts on the topic of disinformation, also a timely issue. What prompted that set of interviews, and what emerged that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I was hugely interested in the topic for a long time, but there were, of course, several things that came together at the same time that made that interesting. One is the 2020 U.S. elections, and flashing back to 2016, all of the disinformation campaigns that came out around that. Another one was the COVID issue and a lot of the disinformation and misinformation coming out around that. And then, of course, a lot of the race issues and the disinformation and misinformation that's coming out around that. And so there was this confluence of things to look at when it came to disinformation and the problems that it can cause. And luckily, I was able to reach out to Teresa Payton and Cindy Otis and Samuel Woolley, both great, phenomenal people that really understand this and could help dive into where the problem lay, and then even more importantly, how to prepare ourselves and our families and our friends to be able to combat this.
Sure. I mean, in times of fear and uncertainty, which we've certainly been living through, it feels like our susceptibility maybe to disinformation may be higher. Is that reflected in your findings, or was something else going on?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. There's a very big similarity between social engineering and disinformation. I mean, disinformation really is just social engineering, but with a slightly different cause behind it.
Right, nice voice.
And the triggers are the same. It's high emotion, anything that causes polarity in the way that people think or believe. But then the other thing behind it is that disinformation can, of course, move a national or political agenda, but it also typically has some kind of financial goal associated with it too. Things like driving you to adware, to subscribe to Patreon sites, and all of that. It's really weird how the goals of all these criminals just and groups tend to coalesce.
Sure. Okay. As we move through 2021, what sorts of things should we be thinking about related to both awareness and social engineering in the year ahead?
A couple things. One, I think in 2020 with COVID, we've seen the normalization of things like QR codes, because we're physically not touching as many things, and on menus and mailers and everything else, people are embedding QR codes. So seeing those all the time but not using those is kind of going away. People are using those more and more. So I think we'll see those weaponized over time. I do think that 2021 is going to be the year of disinformation about the vaccine. and recovery and things like return to work and benefits and healthcare and insurance and everything else. So disinformation is still big. And then 2021 can be the year that security awareness leaders can start to approach their people with understanding and empathy and really build programs that meet them where they are and take them ultimately to where the organization needs them to be while reducing risk.
All right. To shift gears pretty radically here, I'm curious what it's like for you and your colleagues to work alongside the most famous hacker of all time, Kevin Mitnick, who's joined KnowBe4's ranks as your chief hacking officer. What's it like day to day with Kevin?
Kevin is an interesting guy to work with. The biggest thing that I found about him is that he's extremely humble, extremely approachable, and then always gives credit where credit is due. So he'll take ideas from other people and combine those with a different idea. But he always says, hey, here's the person that I got this idea from. Here's where you can go look that up. And here's how I'm making that work. So I think that that's really good to see. The other thing is I've had the privilege to do quarterly webinars with Kevin and see the way that he approaches problem solving. And it really is, it's encouraging and I think humbling to see somebody really approach the topic with the work ethic that he has. He's tireless in the way that he approaches these things.
Interesting stuff. Perry, thanks for joining us today. Really great insights into the new year and the pandemic and disinformation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
This has been Terry Sweeney for Black Hat. Thanks for joining us for this Black Hat Fast Chat. We'll see you next time.